Hi, I'm Mike Cohen, and welcome to another edition of Tap Into Westfield's podcast series. Today we have Joan Lowell Smith. Joan is a longtime resident of Westfield, an historian of Westfield, and a journalist. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Glad to be here.
And I know you're working on a special project now in Westfield.
Yeah, it's so new. We haven't even had our first meeting, but I was named the new chair of the Westfield Historical Society's Hall of Fame Awards, which covers any possible sphere you could think of, from sports to medicine, inventors, and a lot of the names who have already been inducted you would recognize right off.
Can you give us some names? I know Jeff Torborg. Is he one of them?
Yes, he's already been inducted. Gary Kaler, the famous coach everybody loved, and he's in it. I don't want to miss any because there are a lot of athletes, which also might be confusing because it is to me until we have our first meeting that there's also a Hall of Fame awards strictly for athletes. So that would tell me that a lot of these famous guys have been in both groups. Now, I knew Bobby Clotworthy personally because he was a couple years ahead of me at Westfield High, and he won the gold medal in diving in 1952. I remember sitting in Dion Hunter's house, and Whitey Hunter was a buddy of Bob Clotworthy's, and the four of us were sitting on the floor playing poker. Now, is that silly?
So he was in 1952 gold medal Olympian.
Yep.
Wow,
Diving.
wow. And where did he go for the Olympics?
Oh, I wish you hadn't asked me that. I don't remember. But no, he definitely won. I did see him. I didn't belong to Echo Lake Country Club, but one of my friends did, and I saw him practicing his dives a few times. He's pretty impressive.
Wow, that's amazing. And Jeff Torborg, did you tell the listeners who Jeff Torborg is in case they don't know?
Well, he was the manager. No, coach.
Of the Mets.
Yeah, but four other teams as well.
Yes, the
Yeah,
Marlins.
and then he himself as a player achieved some amazing statistics.
He was a major leaguer. He had a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time major league
Yeah,
career.
and he did some astounding things, so he was well deserving of that award.
Do you know him personally?
No, I've never met him,
Oh.
but I did. I was very close friends with Harry Devlin and his wife Wendy, and they were superb artists. And he was also a cartoonist with a great deal of success. And he also did paintings of historic buildings, and he was just superb. And children's books. The two of them together wrote children's books, so they're both in it. They were inducted together.
Oh, and is there any children's books of note that I would know?
Well, you might, because many of them had the word cranberry in it, like the Cranberry Christmas, Cranberry Easter. They had a series that was very popular nationally. So, yeah, they were prolific.
Wow, that's great. Is there any other names that the listeners would like to know from Westfield?
Well, there was a movie actress. Her name was Anne Revere, and she won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in National Velvet. That goes way back to the 40s. Wow. Yeah, and she lived right here in Westfield.
So that's impressive. We have a major league manager and player, a gold medal diver, and a Oscar-winning actress.
Right, among many. And then there's a lot of scientific. There are a lot of scientific oriented awards as well, and those names might not be quite as familiar, but some extraordinary accomplishments that deserve being in the hall.
Well, let's move on. So you've been associated with Westfield for a long time, and what are some things that you love about Westfield? Did you grow up in Westfield? Did you go to high school?
Yeah, I sure did. I grew up in Westfield, graduated from Westfield High, and I was in one of my jobs that I loved was executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, and I was doing that in the 70s for 4 years. 4 years. And we're now, I say we because I still feel connected to the Chamber. This year is their 70th anniversary, and there's a big gala. I believe it's the 19th of April at a catering hall, and the Duprees are going to be singing. So it's going to be a major event.
I see. I have your resume in front of me here, and I see 1976 to 1979. You were the Westfield Chamber of Commerce Executive Director. What was happening in Westfield in 1976 to 1979 that people would like to know about?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's such a dramatic difference from then to now. Where now we have lots of chains, restaurants, realtors, banks. Back then, it was entrepreneurs, uh, and very few chains, and everybody knew everyone else. You could come into a store and they'd say, "Oh, hi, Joan, how are you?" It was just very familial and familiar. It was a different. But today, it's beautiful to look at. It is, and there are big monumental changes going on throughout merchandising, as you know, and so it's being reflected. But the Downtown Association is doing a phenomenal job encouraging new tenants to these rentals.
Can you tell us what was the downtown like? Was there Barron's drugstore was there?
Yeah, Barron's Drugstore and Milady's, which is Saul Drattel, who I love, and he's still very active in everything in town. He's Mr. Westfield, I think, and well, of course, the Rialto's always been there, and it was just one film at a time. And let's see, what else? What else do we have? Oh, little not supermarkets, little tiny markets right on Broad Street. There was even a shop that sold nothing but girdles to the old ladies.
What about everyone wants to know what about the pizza situation? What pizza restaurants were around in 1976?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there was the one on Central, and I'm not sure what it was called. I can't think of what it was called then. Tito's? Or was that Clark? I'm not sure. But there weren't a lot of pizza places. Everybody loved pizza, right. But there weren't a lot of different stores or shops or restaurants, whatever you call them.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about 1970s Westfield?
1970s Westfield. Well, that's such a huge, broad topic. I'm not sure where to begin. But it was. Well, first of all, the mini mansion epic hadn't begun, and on my block alone today, and I've been in my same house for 45 years, and on my block alone, there are 5 mini mansions which were all tear downs. They were all tear downs, and then on the same block, another 5 are people who have extended their homes. So nothing's the same. But when we first moved in, all the houses were predominantly the same size and similar structures.
So, and you live on the north side?
No, I don't. I live on the south side.
South side. I'm sorry. You live on the south side. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the south side has changed. How is that? How have you seen the transformation from south side, north side?
Well, it's sociological too, because when I went to school, the north side, in general terms, obviously not everyone, kind of looked down their noses at the south side, and you said, "Where do you live?" "Oh, the south side." Well, that's disappeared now, I think, because of all the expansion, the mini mansions. So that part has changed a lot. Also, it's more diversified. In my block, there's several ethnic groups represented just in one block, and that never was the case when I was growing up. Never.
Well, that's a very good sign.
It's a very good sign. It's very healthy.
And as I look at your resume some more, I see that you worked for Children's Specialized Hospital from 1993 to 1995.
Yes, and I also worked on both ends of the spectrum. I also worked at the other end for Alzheimer's. So there I had dealt with the people that are in the depressing decline and children who were being helped dramatically, and still are, of course. It was so gratifying seeing the changes that happened at Children's Specialized Hospital. Transformations of kids that looked like they had no hope, and they'd walk out the door. But Alzheimer's, I found the most depressing job I ever had, because it was in the 80s when they knew next to nothing about Alzheimer's, and to this day they hardly know anything. but I had very little words of encouragement I could give to people who called. It was just so sad and still is.
Yeah, that's an area that's gotten a lot of attention of late, but it's an area that still needs more research and more development.
Indeed. And it's no respecter of anyone. I have two friends right now. Uh, Both husbands were wizards of Wall Street. They both have it. And it's just heartbreaking to see.
Now, in Children's Specialized, you saw the transformation. You saw the amazing work that they do to help children there.
Yes. In fact, one case in particular, I was public relations director there, and I got this on national news because a boy had come in who was uh, just one step above comatose from being over anesthetized by a dentist, and his prognosis was very grim. Well, within 3 months, whatever they did with him was so extraordinary. He walked out the door. I walked out the door with his family and the doctor. It was just so impressive. He could speak, he could walk. He still had more rehab to do, but it was a transformation.
Have you kept up with him? Do you know how he's doing today?
No, I wish I did. I would love that. It's like when I did the hotline. It was called Contact We Care when I was on as a hotline worker, and when I did, it's now called Caring Contact. Um, I wanted to follow up. I mean, that you have to detach yourself. You have to be a good listener. But I wanted to follow up. I wonder what happened to that person, and you can't. You just have to learn to detach.
You've also spent some time as a journalist working. Have you covered a lot of stories in Westfield and the surrounding areas?
Well, yeah, and of course for Tap Into, I've done a series of profiles on community leaders, all of whom are women. It's not that I'm excluding men. It just happens that these organizations are all run by women. But that's been rewarding.
Can you tell us about some profiles that you've had and some ones that have particularly stuck into your mind? Stuck
Well,
to you?
um, they're all impressive women, but I've struck a bond with one particular. Well, I can't say that. There's several that I'm very fond of. Janet Sorkin, and but I was going to say um, the woman who is actually on the board of the Westfield Historical Society, but runs the downtown association, which is Sherry. And you know Sherry, don't you?
Yes, we had her on the podcast.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And she's just wonderful. She's dynamic. She's just like, she does the work of about three people all at once.
And how do you think they're doing in that department?
Oh, wonderfully. Just, I mean, it's a tough challenge because all towns are suffering because, as we were talking again before about the retail business and the effects largely from the internet, people shopping online. But she has a dynamic team, and they're doing their best to fill up any empty stores and to keep things going and have events that draw the public. So yeah, she's a dynamo. But all of these women I interviewed were amazing. Yeah.
That's a really good series. What have you heard from feedback from the public from your series?
I haven't really heard a lot of feedback. I honestly can't say that I have. But what I have heard has been dynamic. It's not like when I worked for the Star Ledger, I would get amazing amounts of mail because it was such a gigantic audience. But I don't expect that from just covering one town. But it's been positive. That I can say.
Okay. And what do you see as the future of Westfield? Like, how do you see Westfield growing and continuing to be a dynamic city
Well,
or small or medium-sized town, mid-sized
yeah,
town? I think is the term.
I can only think positively about Westfield because of observing the changes over the years that I've lived here, and also the community spirit is so real. And now you see a lot of these polls that have been taken, where Westfield's always way up near the top for the school. I interviewed Margaret Dolan, who's the superintendent of schools, dynamic woman. And now we have, oh my gosh, now we have a woman mayor, first time in the history of Westfield. So two of the most important jobs, superintendent of schools and mayor, are run by women.
So you spent some time with Dr. Dolan?
Oh yes, yes, because I interviewed her, and she's another one of those dynamos. Yeah, getting things done, and she's been at the helm for quite a while. Now, of course, Shelley Brindle is new, so she hasn't had a chance to do a lot, but she's very impressive.
And what was your take on this public schools in Westfield after spending time with Dr. Dolan?
Well, I was encouraged, but I was also very impressed because of all the areas that they cover today. I mean, and their focus on the whole child, or let's go up to teens, but the person, not just throwing education at them, but they want them to be totally whole, responsible, and to find their niche.
Well, that really goes along with what in today's world. With I spent some time doing a story on somebody who's is anti-bullying professional, and that's what he said you need in this day and age. Work on the whole child,
Exactly.
not just academics or sports, because that way you prevent that type of bullying and that type of things that go on, and it's preventive as opposed to after something occurs. So she sounds like she's right on target.
Right, and she made me feel better about all of the procedures that are in place to prevent a parkland situation, which is not to say it can't happen anywhere, but I was very impressed with all of the connections that she has with the police, so that they're really prepared, very prepared for the worst. But they don't want to focus on that because they don't want a negative environment in the schools.
Right. It's a tough.
Strike a balance, yeah.
Well, we're winding up our interview. It's been very fun. Is there anything you'd like to talk about Westfield that we haven't talked about? Any funny stories or any anecdotes you'd like to end with?
I have a million of them. Do you have a few hours? Well, I can't zero in on one right this minute, but yeah, no, I'm very proud to be from Westfield and don't plan to go anywhere.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you were on our show today.
Me too. Me too. It was fun.
Okay. We'll do it another time. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Wow, you covered a lot. That was great.